Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
Which brings me on to one of the best named nut lubricants that I think exists on the market, which is the infamous now nut sauce.
Nut sauce. Greetings! Welcome to another Guitar Smarts podcast. Thanks for joining us. This week we are continuing our look at the 8 basic guitar maintenance tasks that each and every guitarist should be able to perform, as defined by our very own in-house guitar guru, Mr. Kiran Amliwala. Now, I've been playing guitar for 25 years, and even now, this conversation was a real lesson to me on what aspects of guitar care I have been neglecting, and also what I can do myself rather than rely on a guitar tech for. Subscribe to the podcast in your favourite podcast app so that you don't miss all the other Guitar Smarts podcasts. Come and give us a like on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Guitar Smarts and follow us on Instagram using the handle at guitar_smarts. That's enough waffle from me. Let's get to it. Awesome. Excellent. So there we go. We've changed that. Well, we're changing our strings. We've given our fretboard a good old treat, good old bath in some oil, and polished up our frets. It's looking good now. What's next on the list?
So now we're getting into stuff that now the strings are on, adjusting the truss rod.
Why do we do that? Why do we adjust our truss rod?
So the guitar action is very heavily influenced by the truss rod and how much relief. And we'll talk about that in a minute. How much relief is on the neck? Now, things like the action and the adjustment of the nut and the saddle pieces, I think, goes into the more intermediate side of things, where you've got a bit more knowledge and a bit more specialist tools, and actually shouldn't require, once it's been set, the action at the nut and the action at the saddles, once that's been set by either yourself, if you've got that level of intermediate setup knowledge, or by your tech, that shouldn't really change, because those are fixed points on a guitar, right? Unless you've got saddles that are failing or things like that where they're slipping and moving and adjusting, and that's a separate repair issue. Or you've got excessive wear on the nut over time, which the slot grooves are changing and stuff like that, because for whatever reason. Generally speaking, day to day playing of the guitar, once you've got it right and you're happy with the action at the nut and the saddle, those should stay fixed. What won't stay fixed and what will affect the action and the playability of your guitar, because of the way in which guitars are made of wood and natural substances that are prone to atmospheric changes, is the truss rod. Will need tweaking and adjusting periodically to maintain that action that you are happy with. That's also one of the first things to set correctly, in my opinion, before you then start adjusting the action at the saddle and the nut. So it's one of the first things. Once I've restrung a guitar, allowed the strings to stretch in, settle them in place, I'll look at the action on a guitar and I'll go, right, is it too high? Is it too low? Does it need adjusting? Is there any buzz going on? And before I start looking to adjust anything at the nut or anything at the saddle, I'll say, right, how much relief is there in this neck versus what the strings are exerting on the neck? And the relief is effectively the up bow or back bow of
right. So it's how much. So what you're saying, the relief is how much you allow the neck to bend in sympathy of the pressure of the strings, right? So the strings are pulling on the neck, and the relief is allowing the neck to bend towards the strings.
Well, the relief, I guess, is kind of defined as how much distance there is between the string I mean, that's the action, right? But the relief is the amount. How much are you allowing the strings to pull the neck upwards?
Right. That's it. Yeah.
It's the amount of relief.
That's better described than in sympathy with the string. Yeah, because obviously the neck's not meant to be straight, is it? It's kind of, I mean, a guitar, in my mind, it's kind of like a bow, you know?
Yes.
It's not meant to be this straight thing. It's meant to be, you know, the strings are the only straight part, and they're pulled tight over, as you say, the bridge and the nut, and everything else is meant to then be below it. It's not just meant to be straight underneath the strings, right? There has to be some amount of curve, and the truss rod is controlling that curvature, right?
Exactly. And why does there need to be that amount of curve? Because if you think about the way in which a string moves through space as it's plucked, it's kind of like an elliptical kind of pattern of movement, right?
Yes.
So if you've got a dead straight neck and board underneath it, what you're likely to experience is that string will buzz and hit the frets if it was perfectly straight, because the string isn't allowed to conduct its natural travel. So a little bit of a concave amount of relief in the neck will allow the string to move freely. And then what we do is we utilize, amongst other things, the truss rod to help us set that right level of tension in the neck, so that it's a nice balance between the action, the height of the string off the frets and the fretboard, but also, you know, allowing the string to not buzz out and choke. So, you know, you can see necks that if you turn the truss rod all the way the other way, that will actually start to back bow the other way and end up with a kind of convex hump in the middle, which again,
it's
definitely not good, right? So
it's not a guitar at that point.
It's not really. It's not a playable one. It's not a playable one.
Yeah.
So the truss rod is
So actually, really, although this is an essential thing you should be able to do, it does go hand in hand with already having your nut and your saddle in the right place, because I guess you can't really do that without having those things in the right place. And from my understanding as well of truss rod adjustments, it's a very subtle thing in terms of it's not like, I need to set some relief, so I'm going to give it 6 turns and see what happens. No. You know, the difference in good and right and wrong can be a quarter of a turn of the truss rod.
Less sometimes,
right.
Absolutely less than that sometimes. I would say to never exert more than a quarter of a turn at a time. In fact, do it in increments less than that.
Right.
Because there is the propensity to damage the guitar or the truss rod by being too aggressive with it. And I think that's where a lot of people become fearful. But if you're sensible and you just make very small adjustments, you'll quite quickly see what it does to the action on the neck. It's remarkable. And it's in simplistic terms, it's like you tighten up the truss rod. So right, you turn it tighter and it will straighten it out. You loosen it left and it will allow more relief and more bend in the neck to happen. So you can watch it happening, and it will really have a big impact on the action, you know, particularly in the middle area of the neck. The nut and the saddles will have more of a dramatic impact on the action, you know, at the extremities of the fretboard. And the truss rod is the first thing that I kind of adjust and get the relief right. And then I'll look at the nut and saddle and then see if they need any adjustment. And then if they do, then I'll make those adjustments accordingly. And then I'll go back and check the truss rod again and see if that needs tweaking. So that there is an interplay and a balance between all of them. But this isn't what we're talking about, is in terms of basic routine maintenance on your guitar.
Yeah.
And we're assuming that your nut and saddle actions have been set up correctly and you are happy with them, either when the guitar left the store or when it last left your tech, and something's changed in now the action. That's where a little tweak and a little adjustment, generally, I would normally assume it's just tightening it up a little bit over time, will restore the action to what you wanted it to be.
Perfect. Dear listener, here is your chance to be on the Guitar Smarts podcast. Do you have any questions? Do you have any suggestions for topics for the future? Do you have anything you want to say or comments for things that we've spoken about in the past? Well, if you leave us a message or drop your comments on Instagram or Facebook, then we'll be sure to mention you in a future podcast. Anyway, back to it. Good. So we're now at a stage where we've given out everything. Everything on the neck part is kind of in A-OK condition. What's the next thing we're looking at now, Kiran?
So next, this is the most common complaint that I get with guitars that come to me, and it's generally when things don't work when it's plugged in. Right. Okay. Because again, and it's the analogy of around getting your car serviced. It's the same one, right? Normally people, do the basic amount of maintenance to their car that they have to, but then they really take it into a garage when it basically stops working. And the amount of times that somebody goes to me, brings me a guitar and goes, the pickup isn't working, or this pot is the volume pot is just really crackly and really dodgy, and I think there's a wire loose or something. Oh, and by the way, can you set it up at the same time? And it turns out that the guitar hasn't been set up for ages or maintained really well, but it's the electronics issue that's necessitated somebody to come in and get it fixed. And more often than not, it isn't a broken wire. It's just dirty electronics, right? Really? Honestly, most of the time. I mean, I fix a huge range of different electronic problems on guitars, and quite often, there'll be a loose connection in the jack socket or something like that.
I guess that's the thing. There's more moving parts in the electronics than you realise, right? With your switches, your pots, and the jack socket, there's more movement. It's not just a fixed thing, so that they will wear and change over time.
I mean, proper decent quality pots that are properly, manufactured and sealed to some extent will last a huge amount of time. But what will happen is you will get kind of ingress of bits of grime and dirt and sweat and things like that. And oftentimes when a pot stops functioning correctly or is crackling or making, weird, unpredictable noises or is not tapering the tone or volume in the right way, it just needs a good clean out. And, a 3-pound can of switch cleaner, electronic switch cleaner, can do wonders for electronics. So again, once a year, even if the electronics aren't particularly noisy, just pop off the buttons, the control knobs, so on your Les Paul, take off the tone and volume knobs, and carefully put a cloth on the surface of the guitar. I know your guitars are a poly finish, but certainly on some of the nitro finishes, I just like to protect that with a cloth and things, so none of the switch cleaner gets onto the actual finish of the guitar. And just spray some switch cleaner down into the top of the pots, take the electronics plates off on the back of the guitar, and give everything just a kind of modest squirt of switch cleaner, and then work it into all of the pots and switches, and you'll be amazed. It will just what it can do to bring back a guitar to life. I've given guitars back to people where they're like, "Oh, you've changed out the pots, and this is so much better." And it's like, no, it's the same pots, it's the same guitar. They were just absolutely grubby and needed a really good clean, and I managed to get all of the gunk out of them, and now they're working fine.
Should have charged them for new pots.
I'm too honest. I'm too honest.
So actually, again, and that's something that you're saying that you should do as a matter of habit rather than wait for those scratches and pops and weird sounds to start happening. That's something to do regularly.
Once a year, 6 months if it's a heavy use guitar, and obviously if you're starting to notice some crackling and popping, or a pot volume or tone pot behaving in a weird way, or your 5-way selector switch or your 3-way selector switch for your pickups is kind of a bit sticky or a bit noisy or a bit crackly, get yourself a can of switch cleaner and apply it sparingly, but kind of and with sympathy to the guitar around it. Don't just spray it all over the place. Just carefully apply it into the electronics area and work it into the switch or pot, and then have a see what happens. And sometimes it can take 10 minutes or so of applying a bit, working it in, mopping up the excess that might come out, and doing that. But if you'd be surprised at what comes out on the on the rag in terms of grime and dirt, and then all of a sudden, hurrah, my guitar works again. And it's just like,
just needed a bath.
Yeah, exactly. People get quite embarrassed when I tell them, look, this is what came out of the back of that pot. They're like, oh,
what have you been doing? You've been gardening with it,
Yeah, exactly. What have you been doing with it?
So we've just done a kind of overhaul of the electronics. So not an overhaul, we've just done a spring clean,
a little spring clean, a little gentle maintenance, just to keep them all happy and singing. Yeah,
fantastic. So sorry to interrupt this super interesting conversation. However, if you've made it this far, you should probably subscribe to the Guitar Smarts podcast. You can do that in your favourite podcast app. Go and do that now, and then come back to the show. Let's get back to it. What do we do next?
Right, pickup height.
So this is a magical world of unknowns for me. I haven't got a clue when it comes to pickup height, how I even know how to. Well, I know how to move the pickup height, but what do I do to get it right?
And this is probably the most if the most common tech complaint I get is around dirty electronics and somebody thinking it's more sinister or something wrong. The pickup height is the most overlooked setup area, I think, that people often neglect. Right. People will learn about truss rods, they'll learn about adjusting saddle heights, they'll learn about, all of the kind of basics. And then one of the things that can make the biggest impact on the tone and therefore the playability or kind of satisfaction from a guitar is the pickup height plugged in. And it gets overlooked because people do one of two things. They just never change it and experiment with it or think that it's set correctly at the factory and is something that's not meant to be touched. Or they look at the manufacturer's recommended pickup heights and go, well, that's what the factory spec is of it. And so I would say this is a really easy one to tweak with and play because it's just a couple of screws and you can always reverse it quite quickly, right?
Okay.
So,
sorry, carry on. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, is this a feel thing or is there a correct thing to do? Empirically?
That's a brilliant question, right? So this goes back to like the truss rod thing as well, and what I didn't explain when we were talking about the truss rod. You can buy, and I do use some very well-made measuring kind of rulers and scales to set the truss rod at the right relief for a guitar. And you can either do that by manufacturer's spec or what a customer likes with their other guitars, and you can kind of calibrate it and measure it. More often than not, Matt, the way I was taught is I adjust the truss rod based on feel. If you press down on the first fret and say the 12th or 13th fret of a guitar or wherever it joins the body, you've created a natural straight edge. And if you then press down in the middle of the string, you can see how much relief there is and how much there is before the neck starts to then go into back bow, or you can see if it's got a huge amount of relief in it that can be tightened up. That's done by feel, and that's done by playing it and kind of getting a sense of it. So I didn't cover that in the truss rod bit, and I think it's important to say, because when we're talking about general setup, we're just talking about little adjustments. So you don't need complicated tools to do any of what we've discussed so far. And the pickup height thing is the same. You can use those same types of, finely calibrated, rulers and scales to set the pickup height to exactly the right, adjustment that the manufacturer recommends or that the factory recommends. And you can look up all of that on Google and stuff for whatever pickup it is. But use your ears. Your ears will be the best, and this is why it's such a fun one to play with, because actually you can completely tailor it to what you like, right? Generally speaking, if you raise the pickup height so it's closer to the string, you will get a stronger, louder output. The bass will be thicker, the treble response will be kind of there and clearer, and you'll get more from the pickup. But you might not want that, actually. And sometimes in doing that, a lot of people just, if they do play with the pickup height, they just wind it up as high as they can before it starts to interfere with the string travel.
Vibration, right.
Yeah. Okay. There's two things around string travel. Be careful when you're raising the pickup heights that you don't, when you then fret the guitar, that the string then doesn't touch or kind of mechanically hit the pickup. The other thing is that obviously the string and the pull pieces in the magnet of the pickup have a kind of interplay between them, and so you can, if you set the pickup too high, particularly on single coil guitars, you can create this weird kind of harmonic distortion that happens when the pickup is set too high, and it's actually interfering with the travel of the string, because the magnet is actually pulling on the string in an unnatural way and stopping it kind of moving in its kind of natural form. And you'll hear that in a really weird,
like a choked out kind of sound.
It's a kind of weird, almost like doubling harmonic tone on top of the natural tone of the string. You'll notice it straight away when you do it. You'll go, what's that weird kind of effect that's happened? And it's because you got your pickup set too high. But there is a sweet spot, right? If you're looking to get more thickness and output and volume from your pickups, the higher you set them, obviously, so you don't set them so high that it starts to really interfere with the tone of the string or foul the string, that can be quite fun to play with and can make your guitar feel thicker. So a lot of people do that. But there's another school of thought, and a lot of players are doing this now, where particularly on like a single coil guitar, they drop the pickup height all the way to the scratch plate, and it's like literally level with the scratch plate. And it's kind of like, whoa, that's definitely not giving you the fullest, thickest sound out of that pickup. But then it makes you do something differently with your amp, and it can make a Strat sound more stratty because you've thinned out the sound in a way. You get a more chimey sound with it. And it's but it sounds counterintuitive to do that. But a lot of players get really great sound out of completely flooring the pickups right to the scratch plate. I for me, think there's a sweet spot in the middle somewhere. And that's where you can just use a screwdriver and your ears and play, just kind of experiment what it does with
trust
the
your
sound.
own intuition. What do you like the most? So it's an interesting point, which I think is key to some of this, is approach what you're doing with the information at hand as to what is technically right or recommended, but you should still be using your own intuition and your own gut to kind of decide for yourself what you prefer. Cool.
Don't be tempted to follow the myth and the hype. And if Stevie Ray, did it, don't just necessarily think that it's going to work for your guitar and that's how you need to do it, because
you're not Stevie Ray, for one.
I know, and that hurts me every day.
Awesome.
No, but do you know what I mean? The last thing I would say about pickup height is also use your ears to listen to the perceived volume and tonal qualities between your different pickups. Especially for a live player, that's, a lot of people, I say, they come to me with a guitar and they're just like, I never really use the back pickup on it, or I never really use the middle pickup. It's just weak sounding, or it doesn't, I can't get it to work live as well. And it's just, it's not set at the right height relative to the other pickup. So make sure you do that test of wherever you've got the pickup height that you like on, say, your front pickup or your back or pickup or whatever. Make sure you use your ears to also set the relative volumes of the other pickups as well, because then you'll get a full, usable set of pickups. And people often overlook doing that, and they've got weird volumes going on between all the different pickups. And unless you're after that effect, I think it's something to remember to do.
Good. Okay. Right. Now we're nearing the end. Okay. Let's finish off our guitars. Let's get them ready for playing again. What are the last couple of things? So
last couple of things is again to lubricate any contact points. So lubricate the nut.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you can do this after you've restrung it. Just slacken off the strings a little bit, lift each string up individually as it touches the nut, and utilize like the old hack, traveling guitar tech tip was to get a soft 2B graphite pencil and kind of smudge some of the graphite into the nut slots.
Right, okay. As a bit of a natural lubricant. Yeah. Right.
And that'll work.
Yeah.
It will work. The graphite from a pencil is often described as a handy tool to do that.
So not like WD-40 or, some...
I don't even like using graphite from a pencil. I think that's just a bit messy, and I don't think it lasts properly as well. Definitely don't use something like WD-40 or anything like that. It can
baby
mess
oil.
Up.
No.
Well, Matt, what lubricants you choose to use outside of setting up your guitar is not my.
Well, you did say lubricating the nuts. So.
I did say that, to be fair. So
carried away,
which brings me on to one of the best named nut lubricants that I think exists on the market, which is the infamous now nut sauce.
Nut sauce. And is it good stuff? Is that is that something you'd recommend for people to get some nut sauce?
Yeah, I would. I mean, there's a few different things. I've got nut sauce. I've got there's another one that I've just pulled out of the drawer here. This one is Music Nomad's Tune It. It's called, and this one's really good. I quite like this. I'd say don't use anything with silicon in it. That's the thing.
Right. Okay.
Which is why things. I don't know if WD-40 has got silicon in it, but I know you can buy a lot of cheap kind of silicon-based lubricants that work. They're very good at reducing friction, but silicon can play havoc on kind of guitar finishes and things like that, and can be persistent in a way that it's very difficult to remove sometimes from guitar finishes and things, even by polishing it off. So it just gets messy. So
it does the job as a lubricant, but it's not necessarily a healthy choice for your guitar.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the kind of some of the stuff that I've seen on the internet that's kind of troubling me when people are advising on what kind of stuff to use on your guitar. Like, graphite for lubricating the nut. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's no big deal. But I've seen people advising, Windex is one of the best things to have in your like glass cleaner to polish your guitar with. It's just stuff like that where you just go, no, don't use that. Use some decent products.
Yeah.
Or I've even seen people advising to use, silicon-based lubricants and things like that for lubricating the parts of the guitar. And you just go, no, don't use anything that's silicon-based. It's not the right stuff, and it's going to make a mess everywhere.
Yeah.
So this stuff that I'm using at the moment, I quite like. It's Music Nomad. It's made in the States. Basically I use that to lubricate the nuts and any contact point, all the saddle points and things like that on a guitar. It just reduces the friction, and it stops all of that kind of pinging sounds that you can sometimes hear as you tune up a string to pitch and things like that. I mean, we're assuming that...
And it helps with tuning stability, right?
Yeah, it totally helps with tuning stability. A lot of things around tuning stability is basically because the string is fighting against the friction of the point it's got contact with on the guitar.
Right, okay.
Now, provided the nut slot has been cut correctly and the saddle slots are cut correctly and things like that, which, 90% of the time they are once it's left the factory or a tech, then it's just about a bit of routine maintenance. And again, you're changing your strings anyway. Just get a little bit of this, use it sparingly, or nut sauce, or kind of, if you really want to graphite from a pencil, it works fine. It's just, there are better things to use, I think.
And that will help important for people who use the tremolo arms quite a lot as well. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you're using a lot of trem and stuff like that as well, or different tunings and things like that as well. If you're going between different tunings, it just helps. With tuning stability and stuff. So that's a really little simple hack. Again, that's often overlooked.
Okay, so we've lubricated everything. What's the last thing we do before we put it back in its case for the rest of quarantine?
Clean it. Please clean it. Again, this isn't essential, right? And but just give it a wipe down when you finish playing it, and polish it from time to time. As well, it doesn't have to be like showroom finish. And if you're looking to get a relic road worn guitar look, then obviously don't bother. But this is just my own personal request, really, because the amount of guitars that I get sometimes where I just go, before I even start working on this guitar, I'm just going to have to get the Hoover out and give it a clean because it's just filthy, right? Yeah, but there's a common sense element to it as well, right? Even if you're not keeping the kind of lacquer work or paint work in high gloss, pristine looking condition. Just wiping down, the strings and the saddle areas and stuff like that after you play just helps keep the whole thing working and mechanically operating properly, and stops grime and stuff getting inside your pot or in your jack socket. And I think it just creates that mindset that your guitar is in a good state of condition. So, but also the reason that I say it is because I do know that a lot of people like to keep their guitar clean, but my request to people is please use the right stuff on your guitar to keep it clean, because there are a lot of polishes and things, particularly if you've got expensive instruments with nitrocellulose finishes, that you need to use the right type of thing. If you've got a polyurethane finished guitar, it's a lot more forgiving, and you can use sparingly, a decent quality, furniture polish or something like that, or general household polish. Don't use Windex, as somebody had suggested. That's just silly.
Use Windex for the glass case you keep your guitar in.
Yeah, maybe.
But
but if you've got a nitrocellulose type guitar, really clean, new microfiber cloth, and the Gibson pump polish, I think that's just the best polish, full stop, for all guitars, even if they're polyurethane based finishes. But also if you've got a lot of nitro guitars, or working on a nitrocellulose finished guitar, the Gibson pump polish, it's called, is just excellent stuff. It really brings a guitar back up to new and will look after that finish. So I guess my request is, if you are going to clean and polish your guitar, use the right stuff on it. Don't believe everything on the internet that says you can use all these kind of weird, cheap, wonderful stuff. Your guitar finish is sensitive to abrasive stuff, and particularly, some substances can break down the finish if you've got a very aged or, more refined finish on it. So, yeah.
Amazing. So there we go. Points 1 through to 8.
That's not too difficult, is it, Steve?
I think that's fantastic. I think just to recap, though, we spoke about changing the strings and about the important things we've got to do, making sure we're locking that string off properly so that it doesn't move and change, cleaning and oiling the fretboard so we're protecting the condition of the wood itself and creating a more comfortable instrument to play, cleaning and polishing the frets, same again, keeping them well maintained and improving your playing experience, adjusting the truss rod, checking the electronics and keeping our electronics clean in the guitar so that we're not going to end up with faults and failures down the line, adjusting the pickup height so that we can make sure we get the sound just right for our ears, but also that we're not inadvertently affecting the strings. Then we're lubricating the contact points. So particularly the nut, maybe even the saddles, depending on the kind of, guitar you have. And then before you put it all away, after you finish playing, keeping it clean, getting the dust off of it. Not just for the sake of cleanliness, but also so that, as you said, dust and grime that might be on the guitar doesn't work its way into things that it could affect, like switches and pots and pickups and things like that. And that is what everyone should be able to do.
If you do that relatively regularly, your guitar will end up less often, with a tech needing an expensive setup. It was, you should still do that, and maybe in another podcast, what we'll cover is some of the things that people want to understand about the more intermediate and advanced steps. So in terms of intermediate stuff, bridge height and setting the right radius at the saddle, particularly on an electric guitar with individual saddle pieces, is a really cool thing to learn how to do to make a big difference to your action. Setting the nut height correctly and how to feel confident in doing that. Setting up intonation and trem setup. I think those are all easy to teach yourself. And with the exception of adjusting the nut height, where you'll need some specialist files.
That's kind of destructive work, isn't it? It's not something you can undo once you've done it necessarily.
Not without some super glue and some bone dust, which is Alukia's best friend once you've cut a nut slot a little bit too far. Yeah. So we'll cover this if we go into intermediate setup. But I have been guilty, particularly when I was learning how to do it, of cutting a nut slot too far, and then a little bit of super glue and bone dust will make it back to normal, and no one's the wiser.
I can just imagine walking into somebody's workshop and seeing a box labelled bone dust. I'd be out of there quicker than you can say, super glue my nut back together.
You pass me the nut sauce. Yeah,
the nut sauce. I'm out of here.
And then look, in terms of advanced stuff, we could do a podcast as well on things like fret leveling and recrowning, partial refrets, or at least when to know that it's needed. Making new nuts, and then things like electronics repairs, soldering, finish repairs, that kind of stuff. But I think that's kind of getting into the intermediate side of things and advanced side of things, where you'll need more gear, a bit more knowledge, some more tools. And we can certainly cover that. And I'd like to talk on the podcast at some point about how to definitely set the action at the saddle and the bridge area, and check that your nut is cut correctly, so that at least if you can't do the work yourself, you can feel confident identifying where you might have some problems that you need to send it to a tech. Because I think that's the next step. For us to talk about guitar setup, is that once you've done all of those 8 basic steps and you've got those under your kind of belt with comfort, then it's, if the guitar's still not playing right, how do you identify what it is that might be causing the problem? And then is it something that you decide, okay, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to send it to a tech? So we'll cover that. We'll cover those things in another episode.
That's a good point, actually, that you raised there. I guess you don't necessarily always have to know how to do everything, but learning to identify the issues is important.
Yeah, it can be important, right? Because then it kind of gives you a point from which to start to say, well, is it something that I would feel comfortable doing on this guitar based on the cost of it, or how much I want to increase my knowledge? And then you can teach yourself and you can have a go at it. Or you can then look up reputable places like StewMac, like Crimson Guitars, or somewhere like that to learn more about how to do it yourself. And if you really feel that it's not something that you want to learn or spend the time doing, then at least you can have an informed discussion with your guitar tech when you get to him or her and say, well, look, I've gone through all of this. I think the truss rod's adjusted correctly. This is how I take care of my guitar. But I'm still having a buzz issue here, or the action's not quite right here. I think we might need to look at, adjusting the nut or the saddle. And, that's always nice to have that type of conversation with somebody when I'm chatting through their guitar and what I think needs to happen to it.
Good. Well, that's amazing. Thanks for taking us through that, mate. I think that's so important. And I've actually, even myself, I'm coming away from this now thinking, well, I need to get a few things. And I'm gonna, there's definitely nothing on that list that I can't approach myself, and I'm gonna try and, improve my guitars now following that. So thank you. Really important.
Yeah, no worries, man. I hope it's been useful. And if people have got questions, then they can always get in touch with us on the social media sites on Facebook or indeed Instagram, and we can drill into some more specific questions people have got. Obviously, we've covered some of the real basics here, and there are so many different things that contribute to a guitar setup and guitar maintenance, and we'll be happy to answer anybody's questions if they want to get in touch with us.
Yeah, please do. That'd be fantastic. Awesome. Right, buddy. Cracking time to catch up, and I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to having another catch up next week.
Yeah, likewise, buddy. Take care of yourself. Have a good week, and look forward to recording another podcast with you soon.
Absolutely. All the best, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Another interesting conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. Come back for more next week. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe to this podcast on your favourite podcast app so you never miss a show. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/guitarsmarts. Like us on Instagram at guitar_smarts. Anyway, have a cracking week. Speak to you soon.